Some of our best experiences and memories are those that warm the heart and make us a better person. The transaction of one gift for another isn't the soul of Christmas. The economy of gift-giving isn't intended as either a contest or a mere exchange of one set of currency for another. It's the personal thought, the kindness, the effort to bring joy to another person without the expectation of a return. Our best gifts, then, aren't things, but rather the impact we have on others. Christmas is not about the change in your pocket, but the change in your heart. If at first you don't succeed, don't give up on yourself. Christmas is about the gift of change, becoming better through the gift of the Savior, something even old Ebenezer Scrooge knew something about. We are inspired by easing the burdens of another, change for the better in our own lives and hearts, to give as Jesus would. His life was a gift each day. He never gave up on us, and he never will. I remember when I was taught as a young boy about going the extra mile. On Sundays, it was the teachings of Jesus that taught me it wasn't enough to do only what was asked, but to put forth extra effort and go further than required, that demonstrated Christ-like love. Enduring to the end and never giving up were additional qualities taught to me and demonstrated by others around me. Both my grandfathers demonstrated qualities of service and endurance. I'll never forget their example or their kindness to me. My own father is a great exemplar of service. When I announce sporting events, I often include in my opening remarks a tribute to greatness during the welcome. A direct lift from my invigorating intro includes this phrase: "Greatness is overcoming adversity while lifting up those around you." We cheer on those who demonstrate endurance under pressure and strive to accomplish difficult goals. Here's the story of one of them. In 1954, Roger Bannister, at age 25, ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Long considered impossible by scientists, this feat required running a mile at an average of 15 miles per hour. Roger Bannister was the first to ever do so. 2 months after this impressive achievement, Henry Marsh was born, setting the stage for a life of running. Henry Marsh qualified for the U.S. Olympic team in 1976, 1980, 1984, and 1988, running in the 3,000-meter steeplechase. In national ranking, Marsh was the American champion in the steeplechase 9 times and has been considered as one of the best steeplechase runners in American history. His style of competing in foot races was to hang near the back of the field at the start of the race and then work his way forward, and then with a burst of speed, reach the front and win. In 2001, he was inducted into the U.S. Track and Field Hall of Fame. Notably, in 1977, Henry Marsh ran the 3,000-meter steeplechase with a time of 8:21.60. That record-setting pace would stand as a Brigham Young University record for 46 years, until it was broken on 6 May 2023 during a race in Walnut, California. A remarkable BYU athlete recorded a new personal best in the 3,000-meter steeplechase, running 8:17.62. It was the second fastest performance ever by a college athlete. It was almost 4 seconds faster than the school record set by Henry Marsh in 1977. The same athlete won the 2023 NCAA Division I Outdoor Track and Field Championship title in the 3,000-meter steeplechase in June at Austin, Texas, setting a new stadium record in the process. I wouldn't have known any of this except for what happened at the July 8, 2023 USA Outdoor Track and Field Championships in Eugene, Oregon. Running, it seems, is not his only talent. Getting up after falling down is another, and the reason why I remember Kenneth Rooks. Persevering and enduring to the end makes a difference. On that day, we saw in a moment a quality we want to emulate in our own lives. Here is how that event unfolded. 14 long-limbed and agile runners lined up on the track. As the starting shot was fired, all of them leap forward. Immediately, 6 runners pull to the front as the pack stretches out along the track. Kenneth Rooks is among the leaders, but not in first place. This race lasts less than 9 minutes. At 2 minutes and 12 seconds into the race, there is some jostling in the ranks at one of the steeplechase barriers, and NCAA champion Kenneth Rooks falls and is left behind all the runners as they leap over and around him. He quickly rolls to his side and then gets up and continues to run. At this point, he is so far behind, he isn't even seen in most camera views. Just finishing the race would be an accomplishment now. Slowly, he rejoins the pack of runners. At 6.5 minutes into the race, Kenneth overtakes the runners in the pack and continues to advance. At the start of the last lap, Kenneth joins the lead 6 and then, from the outside lane, gains the 3rd place position while continuing to advance. At 7:32, he captures the attention of the TV announcers and is in 2nd place. You can hear the excitement in the stadium build. He falls back to 4th place, but after the final water jump regains 2nd place. From the outside lane, Kenneth pours out additional speed and takes a decisive lead in the final stretch to win the national championship to the raucous cheers of fans and announcers. It is his rise from the fall that sets him apart, his persistence over adversity that makes his win truly remarkable. His courageous finish is a laudable accomplishment. What was his thoughts during the race? Immediately after finishing and still out of breath, he told the reporter, "Everyone was running over top of me, but I got up and I just told myself I need to go into Henry Marsh mode. And he ran from the back. So interestingly, for the race, that's the scenario I went through if I fell. If I was like, okay, if I fall, I just got to get back up. I'll work my way back up slowly. If I get up close to the pack, I'm feeling good, we'll see what happens." Rooks' mental preparation before the event said he was prepared mentally for how he would react if he fell during the race. That made a difference in his personal tenacity and resilience, and why I remember him. Similar to this experience, but on a different stage and time, is the story of Alma Wilford Richards, born 20 February 1890, in the small farming town of Parowan, Utah. He was the first resident from the state of Utah to win a gold medal. It was in Sweden in 1912, the same year that New Mexico is admitted as the 47th U.S. state. Other notable events during that year include the following: Arizona, later admitted as the 48th U.S. state that year, and the last of the contiguous states to be admitted to the Union. The Manchu Qing dynasty of China comes to an end after 268 years, with the abdication of the emperor in favor of the Republic of China. Wernher von Braun, German-born American physicist, is born. The White Star liner RMS Titanic departs from Southampton, England, with more than 2,200 passengers and crew on her maiden voyage, bound to New York. The unsinkable Molly Brown is one of the survivors of that fateful voyage. As the world of electrified homes was making life easier and brighter for many people, the wonders of electricity were also being harnessed in the form of toys. Electric trains were the very latest thing in the 1910s, and children were enthralled with these new devices. Just a few years later, Raggedy Ann and Andy would be popular. The dolls were just becoming popular in the late 1910s, and by the 1920s, they were one of the most popular types of toys. What's more, women from poor families could make their own version with scraps and a bit of yarn, something many struggling mothers were glad of. Raggedy Ann remained quite popular until the 1980s. This is part of the historical setting for the 1912 Olympics. The men's high jump, also known as the running high jump to distinguish it from the standing high jump, was a track and field athletics event held at the 1912 Summer Olympics. This is one of 12 events that has been held at every Summer Olympics. In July 1912, 37 high jumpers from 10 nations competed. The event was won by Alma Richards of the United States. But for the rest of the story, I turn to accomplished writer Lee Benson for his narrative as published in the BYU Magazine, Fall 1996. Alma Richards, BY High, class of 1913, won an Olympic gold medal in the 1912 Olympics held in Stockholm, Sweden. His career as a stellar track and field star continued for more than a decade. He is sometimes called the best athlete in BY High sports history. Alma's reign extended for 35 years to the late 1940s, when Harold Christensen, BY High class of 1949, won an equal right to that highest laurel. It should be noted that before the advent of Brigham Young University was Brigham Young High School. It is a story that once you've heard it, you'll think either James Thurber wrote it or Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer made it up. It's equal parts Rocky, The Natural, and Chariots of Fire. It includes maybe the greatest football coach there ever was, maybe the greatest athlete there ever was, and maybe the greatest poem that was ever written. It stretches from the Jackrabbit Flats of southern Utah to the King's Palace in Stockholm, Sweden, to ticker-tape parades in New York City and Provo, Utah. And the value of education figures in there too. If it weren't for school, Alma Richards never would have known he could jump so high and go so far. Named after, in this order, a great prophet of the Book of Mormon and the fourth prophet of the LDS Church, Alma Wilford Richards was born on February 20th, 1890, to Mormon pioneer parents sent by Brigham Young to help settle the southern Utah outpost of Parowan. Of 10 children, Alma was the 9th. He liked everything about High Plains country living, if you don't count going to school. He dropped out in the 8th grade when, at 14, he was already about as big as he'd ever get, 6'2" and over 200 pounds. Few men in those days were bigger. He worked the land and in his father's store, Parowan Mercantile and Cooperative, and whenever he could, he would saddle up his horse and just ride. One night when he was 18, he found himself far from home when a downpour hit. He made it to Lund, a small railroad town, and gave in to the rain, seeking more shelter than he could get, sleeping under his horse. Because of the storm, the available rooms were at a premium, and he ended up sharing a bunk with a man on his way to California, who'd come all the way from Michigan. His name was Professor Thomas Trueblood, a Native American and lecturer with the traveling Indian Exposition commissioned by Michigan State University. The conditions were more conducive to talking than sleeping that night, and so they talked through much of it, the boy and the professor. Alma found himself telling Dr. Trueblood about his hopes and dreams, and how he wanted to be as free as the breeze. He longed to travel the world and to see it all. The professor told him he could do as he wished, but only if he first got his education. It was learning, the professor said, that opened such doors of freedom. By the time the rain stopped and the sun came up, Alma had made up his mind. His days as a dropout were history. He kicked up his horse and didn't stop until he got to Beaver, Utah, where he enrolled in the Murdoch Academy, a private school, grades 9 through 12. He moved in with his sister and her husband, who had a home near the school. When you have 9 brothers and sisters, and almost all of them are older, it can come in handy. On his way to becoming an educated man, one of the Murdoch teachers asked Alma, the biggest kid in the school, if he'd like to join the track team. Alma didn't know how to answer. He knew nothing about athletics. All he'd ever raced were rabbits. The teacher suggested he at least give it a try. There have been worse suggestions. The shot put, the discus, the sprints, the distance runs, the pole vault, you name it, Alma entered it. In the end, he didn't just join the track team, he was the track team. 3 months later, when the state finals were held in Salt Lake City, Alma Richards, all by himself, scored enough points to win the Utah State Team Championship for his school. Improbably, Little Murdoch Academy unseated Salt Lake High, the perennial powerhouse, 32 points to 22, and took the first-place trophy back home to Beaver. By itself, not a bad story to tell the grandkids, but heck, that was just the warm-up. The next year, Alma transferred to Brigham Young High School in Provo. At the turn of the century, the students of BY High and Brigham Young University commingled on the same campus. So it was that, once again, as was his wont, Alma caught the eye of a coach and an educator. This time it was a man named Eugene L. Roberts, who everyone called Timpanogos. Roberts coached the track team at Brigham Young. One day, after watching Alma's jumping ability while he played a game of pickup basketball, Timpanogos Roberts pulled the young student aside. "See that bar?" he said. "Jump over it." Still wearing his basketball uniform, Alma watched a few others go over the bar and then, with no further warm-up, ran towards the high jump pit and cleanly cleared the bar. Timpanogos Roberts went pale. The bar was set at 5 feet 11 1/2 inches. The school record was 6 feet 2 inches. The world record was 6 feet 7 inches. The coach, not realizing the 21-year-old in front of him was still in high school, stammered out a question Alma had heard before. "Like to join the track team?" Roberts had coached thousands of athletes, had never seen anyone so natural. With a little coaching, he told Alma, he could have him jumping with the best in the world. He could get him ready for the Olympic Games. Said Alma, "The what?" And so, life took another dramatic swing for Alma Richards, as he and Roberts went to work. Through the fall and winter, they studied form and technique. Daily, they'd meet and train. The Olympics, Robert explained, were to be held late the next summer in Stockholm, Sweden. Flush from the resounding success of the previous Olympic Games held in London in 1908, there was considerable interest in building around the world in anticipating of the Stockholm Games. The United States now had a full-fledged Olympic official committee, and dates and times for any number of trials that would select the U.S. team had been posted at schools and athletic clubs around the country. For his new protege, Roberts targeted the high jump trials, scheduled in Chicago in May. But if the athletic community was enthused about the new Olympic movement, the first Olympic Games of the modern era had just been held 16 years earlier, in 1896 in Athens. The world at large wasn't yet so enamored of either its success or commercial value. That's what Roberts found out as he made the rounds of businesses and philanthropists in Provo, trying to raise money so he and Alma could book passage to the meet in Chicago. Benefactors were few and far between. In 6 months, all the coach could raise, thanks mostly to a $150 donation from the BYU administration, was enough for one passage. One of them wouldn't be able to go. At the Provo station in the early of May 1912, Roberts ushered Alma onto the train. He gave him some last-second advice, wished him luck, and, for good measure, gave him a rolled-up copy of Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, the coach's personal favorite. "Read it," he told him. "It will bring you inspiration." Little could Alma realize at the time how literal much of that poem's advice would be. The part about, "If you can make a heap of all your winnings and risk it in one turn of pitch and toss," and the part about, "If you can walk with kings nor lose the common touch," and the part about, "If you can fill each unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run." He got to Chicago late in the afternoon the day before the meet. Upon Roberts' advice, he went straight to the track at Northwestern University and took a few practice jumps. He routinely cleared the bar at heights above 6 feet, finishing with a jump of 6'2". Fortunately, as he did so, a man was watching from the far end of the field. That man was Amos Alonzo Stagg, the football coach at the University of Chicago and one of the most powerful men in sports in the country. Coach Stagg was a member of the Olympic Selection Committee. At the next day's competition, Alma was the most anonymous contestant there. No one knew who he was or where he came from. Since he wasn't a college student yet, he had never actually competed anywhere but in Utah, and so he had no real credentials. Undaunted by his lack of notoriety, however, he jumped as well as he ever had and, with a jump of 6'3", wound up winning the competition. But politics and the Olympics have always been fast friends, and in 1911 was no different then than now. When the results of the Chicago meet were sent to the selection committee in New York, Alma Richards was not assigned to the U.S. team because no one had heard of him. He was dismissed as a one-meet wonder, a fluke. Well-known and well-connected jumpers from other trials held in California, at Stanford, and on the East Coast at Harvard were named to the United States high jump team. The high school kid from Utah was out of luck. Or so it seemed, until Amos Alonzo Stagg cleared his throat. Apparently, Stagg arrived late in New York for the official selections because he didn't contribute his input until the high jump team had already been selected. It wasn't until he scanned the list and noticed that Richards was not on it that he asked why. His fellow selectors told him, to which Stagg said, "I saw this kid jump with my own eyes. I saw him jump 6 feet in his sweats." A spirited debate ensued. Stagg won. They put A. Richards on the supplemental Olympic team. He would be sailing to Stockholm, after all. Instead of going west to Provo after the trials, Alma went east to New York, where he boarded the USS Finland, bound for Sweden with the rest of the U.S. team. He was not the toast of the boat. Rustling jackrabbits in Parowan was one thing. Sailing on an ocean liner with the cream of American athletes was another. Rube, bumpkin, hayseed, hick. Name your turn-of-the-century rural insult, and that's what they called Alma. The name didn't help either, and neither did the case of a red eye he developed as they crossed the ocean. He had to constantly wear a flappy felt hat he found to keep the sun out. When the ship finally docked in Stockholm, Alma was not at all unhappy to get off. He was one of a crowd of American high jumpers when the competition began a couple of days later in Stockholm's sparkling new jewel of an Olympic stadium. These were the good old days of stockpiling the field, and 11 U.S. athletes were entered among a total field of 57 athletes representing 20 countries. Among the Americans entered was George Horan, a Stanford University student and then world record holder at 6 foot 7 inches, and Jim Thorpe, a Sac and Fox Indian from Oklahoma and a star of the U.S. team, who was also, beyond the high jump, entered in the Olympic pentathlon and decathlon competitions. Young Alma Richards, still wearing that floppy felt hat, was just along for the ride. And he looked it as the competition began. On the opening height, he missed twice before a successful third and final try. At the next 2 heights, the same thing. But at that, he was still alive, while others weren't so fortunate. By the time the bar got past 6 feet 1 inch, the only Americans remaining were Horan, Thorpe, Egon, Eriksson, and Richards. They were joined by one German, Hans Liesch, who was striking fear into them all. At every height, the lanky German had cleared the bar with ease on his opening try. No American could say the same. When the bar was moved above 6 feet 2 inches, Liesch did it again. Only 2 Americans managed to clear the height on their third and final tries, Horan and Richards. Now, it was a battle by 3 men for the 3 medals as the height moved a 1/4 inch past 6 feet 3 inches. Again, Liesch cleared on his first jump. Again, Horan and Richards missed on theirs. On their second tries, the Americans missed again. Horan, the world champion and pre-meet favorite, tried one more time and missed. If Richards missed, the gold medal would be Liesch's. He did not. Now there were just the 2 of them. By this time, an amazing transformation had taken place among Richards' teammates. They had become mesmerized by this country bumpkin who'd been the butt of all their shipboard jokes, but now was battling the German head-to-head for the gold medal. They collectively assembled off to the side of the high jump pit to root for him. It was Horan and Jim Thorpe who led the cheering. Now they were not making fun of the guy in the floppy hat. They were his most ardent supporters. The bar was raised to an even 6 feet 4 inches. Richards was first to jump. But before he did, he walked to a spot in the infield grass. There, in full view of the sold-out stadium crowd of 24,000, he took off his hat, kneeled on the ground, and he said a prayer. As recounted in his memoirs, this is what he said: "God, give me strength, and if it's right that I should win, give me the strength to do my best to set a good example all the days of my life." As soon as he said amen, he put his lucky hat back on, walked to the end of the runway, and without hesitation raced for the bar. He cleared it by what Thorpe and Horan would later agree was a good 2 inches. After that, Liesch never had a chance. For the first time all day, he missed on his opening attempt. Then he missed on his second try, and then, as he composed himself for his third and final attempt, he was distracted by the conclusion of the 800-meter run. Looking over at the finish line as he watched his countryman Hans Braun, the pre-race favorite, was surpassed at the tape by 3 Americans, led by Tad Meredith, an unknown teenager. His third try was his worst. The medal ceremony was held shortly thereafter, where the Olympic officials gave Horan the bronze medal and Leash the silver. The King of Sweden himself, Gustav V, draped the gold medal around Richard's neck, after which he invited Alma to his palace. He told him his son, the prince, was an aspiring high jumper, and he'd appreciate it if Alma could give him some pointers. As Alma spent his time at the palace in the ensuing days, Jim Thorpe managed to avenge being shut out of the high jump medals by winning both the pentathlon and the decathlon, whereas King Gustav made his famous, "You, sir, are the finest athlete in the world" declaration. When they finally doused the flame and the USS Constitution set return sail for the States, Richards and Thorpe could compare King's stories. Upon landing in New York, the U.S. team, which won a resounding 61 medals in Stockholm, including 23 gold, was feted in a ticker-tape parade down New York's Fifth Avenue. For Richards, that was a forerunner to the one he'd get when he finally pulled into Provo about a week later, on August 22, 1912. As he emerged from the train, more than 1,000 people rushed to congratulate him. After many speeches and a heartfelt salute by Alma to Timpanogos Roberts, wherein he dedicated his gold medal to his coach, there was a parade from the station to the BY campus, where his final year awaited Alma, of high school. He graduated from Brigham Young Prep School with honors and accepted a Power Company scholarship to attend Cornell University in New York. The Olympics did wonders for his self-confidence, and whereas he once was just a marginal student, his aptitude and attitude were now boundless. He thrived at Cornell in the classroom and on the track. He was the national AAU high jump champion in 1913, and later, as he expanded his repertoire, he became a decathlete as well. By the time of the National AAU Championship of 1915, held in conjunction with the World's Fair in San Francisco, he became the national decathlon champion, finishing some 500 points ahead of a man by the name of Avery Brundage, who would later head the International Olympic Committee. He never did compete against Jim Thorpe in the decathlon, because Thorpe became a professional football player after the Stockholm Olympics and wasn't eligible for amateur track competitions. But at the San Francisco meet, Richards' 10 event points totaled in his first major decathlon was only slightly less than what Thorpe had scored in Stockholm. He was far and away the United States' best decathlete entering the 1916 Olympic Games. Not to mention its best high jumper. Winning 2 gold medals was a distinct possibility, but those games were never held, replaced instead by World War I. It was one of the ironies of Alma Richards' life that he got to the Olympic Games when he hardly knew what they were, and didn't get there when he had them squarely in his sights. After Stockholm, he would never return to an Olympic arena, and neither would Hans Leash. On the date when they should have entered their rematch in the 1916 Olympic Games that had been scheduled for Berlin, they instead were wearing the uniforms of the armies of their respective countries on opposite sides of the fight. Alma did manage to enter the American Expeditionary Force Track and Field Championships in Paris, where he was a soldier there. At the age of 29, he won the high jump and standing broad jump, finishing second in the triple jump and third in the broad jump. His personal total of 14 points was 4 points higher than anyone in the meet. And when he came to the winner's podium for his 4th medal, General George Pershing himself said, "Whose medal are you after this time?" When Lieutenant Richards said, "Mine, sir," the general saluted. "Good to see old-timers still making good," he said. After graduating with honors from Cornell, Alma entered graduate school at Stanford before enrolling in law school at the University of Southern California. He got his law degree, and, as high jumpers do, he passed the bar. But he chose not to practice law. Instead, he went into teaching. He got a job as a science teacher in Los Angeles at Venice High School, where he remained for 32 years until he retired. To those who knew him, his choice of vocation came as no surprise. If it hadn't been for teachers, he always said, he'd never found his way. He was named Utah's Track and Field Athlete of the Century and was inducted into the National Helms Hall of Fame. After his death in 1963, he again returned, according to his wishes, home to Parowan, where he was buried. Except for Kresimir Kosic, who played on Yugoslavia's gold medal winning basketball team in 1980, Alma Wilford Richards remains the only student from Brigham Young to win a gold medal in the Olympic Games. And even if it was Brigham Young High School, nobody's quibbling. He just got an early start, was all. By Lee Benson. Lee Benson is a freelance writer and columnist for the Deseret News, BYU Magazine, fall 1996. Overcoming adversity and personal challenge is a lifelong quest for some of us. I'm impressed by the rising generation and their grit. Not all acts of resilience are as public or as competitive. Personal accomplishments in life should be equally celebrated. For the past 7 years, I've been blessed to be the BYU marching band announcer and perform with them. We get to welcome the public and provide the starting energy and bring the team onto the field, as well as perform a combination of visual and musical artistry that is inspiring. Among the more than 200 band members are those that serve others and demonstrate personal qualities of service and greatness, reaching new goals and overcoming adversity. Becoming familiar with their story and being able to work with them is an honor. I have seen those who are just recently exploring adulthood, some who have recently married, those who struggle with physical challenges, and all of them who get up each day to make a difference in the world. At their core is an organizational culture of sharing the light of Christ. They strive to do better each day and build light and life in others, even on days when they may struggle to light their own fires. Sometimes that is in the way they lead their section, ensuring that everyone gets fed before the event or that the equipment is set up and ready. BYU Marching Band Director Fred McInnes once told me about several band members who are exceptional. There are those that glow, that build others up, that draw people closer to them by their sheer presence. I believe in the rising generation. I believe in miracles and the joy of perseverance, and that this brings change in our lives and is reflected in others. Greatness is overcoming adversity while building up others around you. I tip my hat to the leadership and members of the BYU Marching Band, the bold, the bright, the power of the Wasatch. Not all are destined for public acclaim of individual accomplishment like the Olympic Championship, but there are plenty who demonstrate the resolve to succeed. I believe in our young adults of today. They are our future and are demonstrating they have the resilience to make a difference. They stand out not because they wave a flag, but that they put their hoe to the field and go to the end of the row. They do it cheerfully and without any recognition. My hope this year is that we won't give up on ourselves or the opportunity to persevere in doing good. My hope is that we will accept the invitations of the Savior to come and follow Him, so that each of us can feel the joy that each new sunrise brings. Merry Christmas.